Evening YouTube, welcome back to the channel. This is IMAX Sports and our football video, and today I'm talking about Tom Brady's three separate Hall of Fame careers. Tom Brady, in his time in the NFL, played for a total of 21 years, 20 full seasons. The 1 year he got injured at the beginning of the season, and I wanted to go over his three separate, distinct career sections that could all have been considered Hall of Fame careers had they been three separate people. So in this video, I'm splitting Tom Brady up into Brady 1, Brady 2, Brady 3. I have a little storyline that goes along with it too. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty in-depth storyline. So we're going to be going over him, and then we're going to be comparing those three careers to other Hall of Fame quarterbacks and things that they did, and arguments why all three of those players would have made the Hall of Fame had they been separate people. So I thought this would be an interesting idea. Hope you guys enjoy. And again, sorry I haven't been making too many videos recently. School's been a lot, but I had some time today, so I thought this would be a fun idea. Let's get into it. So for this video, I decided to split Brady's career up into three different segments. First is a 7-year segment. Second is a 7-year segment, and the last is a 6-year segment. Brady 1 played from 2001 to 2008. Brady 2 played from 2009 to 2016, and Brady 3 played from 2016 to 2022. The last career obviously has way less games, not only because it has the less season, but also because he was suspended for 4 games 1 year. So there's 19 less games in that career, but still arguments can be made that it is a Hall of Fame career. What constitutes a Hall of Fame career? Well, I'm going to be comparing Tom Brady to Troy Aikman, Steve Young, and Kurt Warner today. Troy Aikman got into the Hall of Fame mostly because of his 3 Super Bowl rings. He did have 4 Pro Bowl votes and an MVP, along with those 3 rings. But his playoff stats and his Super Bowl rings definitely elevated him to the Hall of Fame status. Steve Young had a fantastic career. He had multiple MVPs. He led the league in completion percentage and passer rating a lot of different times, as well as passing touchdowns as well. He won 1 ring in his career, although he was on the 49ers for 2 other ones with Joe Montana, and he had a fantastic career. And Kurt Warner is the only one of these 3 that was not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he made the Hall of Fame nonetheless, and he had a he had a short career. All 3 of these players had fairly short careers, but Troy Aikman's a little bit longer, but for his short career, Kurt Warner did a lot with it. So I figured that these would be 3 very comparable people to Tom Brady. Not to Tom Brady, but to the individual Tom Bradys. So from 2001 to 2008, Tom Brady had made 4 Pro Bowls in those 7 seasons. He was 86-24 for his quarterback record. He had over 26,000 yards, 179 touchdowns, 86 interceptions, and a passer rating of 93. He was 14-3 in the playoffs. He had 3,954 yards in the playoffs, which is good for number 11 of all time, I believe. Might be a little bit higher than that. I think it's top 10. I think it's good for number 9 of all time, actually. 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and a passer rating of 88.0. This first career will be compared to Troy Aikman. A lot of it is because this was Brady's worst career as far as stats are concerned, but he did earn 3 rings. He started 110 games in these 7 seasons. Troy Aikman had 165 starts in his career. Although Brady had 55 less starts, he only had 8 less wins, with a 78.1 winning percentage compared to Troy Aikman's 57% winning percentage. He did have 6,000 less yards, but he had almost 40 extra yards per game for his career, and he finished with more touchdowns, even with the 55 less games. He had 197 touchdowns compared to Troy Aikman's 165. And although both of these players played at different times, they were in the same era. Troy Aikman played mostly in the 90s. Tom Brady played this career in the early part of the 2000s. He had 4 Pro Bowls and 1 MVP. Troy Aikman had 6 Pro Bowls and 0 MVPs. And in the playoffs, Tom Brady had 17 starts to Troy Aikman's 15. Their playoff statistics are very similar. Both of them, a lot of wins, very few losses. 3 Super Bowl rings, almost 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns and 12 interceptions for Tom Brady, and 23 touchdowns for 17 interceptions for Troy Aikman. I think some of the stark advantages that Tom Brady has is the fact that he has more touchdowns and more yards per game, as well as a 78.1% winning percentage. I think a lot of people would argue that if someone plays 7 seasons, they don't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. But the other argument is that if you win 3 Super Bowls as a quarterback, and your winning percentage in the regular season, as well as your stats, are very good for the time, and you win an MVP, I think that there's a very strong argument for Tom Brady to make the Tom Brady number 1 to make the Hall of Fame. Now, this is where the storyline comes in. So, the next Tom Brady number 2, has a very similar career to Steve Young. You see, Tom Brady number 2, he was sat on the bench. Tom Brady number 2 didn't play a lot for the majority of his first few years on the team. And because of that, he had to live up to the expectations of the 3-time Super Bowl champion, Tom Brady number 1, that preceded him. Joe Montana was the 4-time Super Bowl champion that preceded Steve Young. And when Tom Brady number 2 got the football for the first time after being a backup for 7 years, he definitely did a lot with it. He made 7 Pro Bowls in those 7 seasons. He had an 85-27 quarterback record, slightly worse than Tom Brady number 1, but still very respectable. 31,582 yards to almost 6,000 more than Brady 1. 231 touchdowns, 34 extra touchdowns on top of Brady number 1, and 64 interceptions for a passer rating of 99.4. In the playoffs, though, his record dipped a little bit. He was only 8-6 in the playoffs compared to Brady number 1, who was 13-4. He had 4,000 yards in the playoffs, something that Brady number 1 was unable to do. 30 touchdowns and 16 interceptions for a passer rating of 89.4. He made 7 Pro Bowls and won 1 MVP and won 1 Super Bowl ring in 2014. So these 2 longtime backups got their starting jobs and did a lot with them. Tom Brady, number 2, had 85 wins compared to Steve Young's 94. Steve Young had 9 extra wins, but he also played 31 extra games. So Brady, number 2, had a 10% winning percentage advantage. As far as yards are concerned, Brady, number 2, almost as many yards as Steve Young. He had 50 extra yards per game. 282 yards a game would be good for top 3 of all time for passing yards per game in a career. And he had 231 passing touchdowns compared to Steve Young's 232. There's an argument that could be made that Tom Brady's statistical advantage over Steve Young has much to do with the fact that he played the start of Brady 2's career was 10 years after the end of Steve Young's career, which is a very reasonable claim. But both quarterbacks had 7 Pro Bowls, and Brady number 2 did have an MVP in his career. So both quarterbacks finished with the same number of Pro Bowls, even though Tom Brady number 2 only played 7 career seasons. So if you want to do a statistical comparison, the fact that they both made 7 Pro Bowls and Brady number 2 was in the MVP conversation almost every single season shows a lot about the stats for his time as well. Both of them had 14 playoff starts. Both of them went 8-6, and both of them won 1 Super Bowl. Steve Young got more Super Bowl rings than Brady number 2, but depending on how long Brady number 2 was a backup, he could have had 3 or 4 rings as well. He had 4,000 yards in his 14 games to Steve Young's 3,100. He had 286 yards per game in his 14 playoff starts versus Steve Young's just 222. And he had a pass rating of 89.4 with 30 touchdowns and 16 interceptions compared to Steve Young's 19 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. The main difference between Steve Young and Tom Brady, number 2, is the fact that Steve Young obviously played a longer career, but he had 2 MVPs compared to Brady number 2's singular MVP. I think that because of the way that Steve Young's career went and the statistics that he had, he probably still would have made the Hall of Fame had he only had 1 MVP season. And although Tom Brady didn't have all of the years leading the league in passer rating that Steve Young did, he was still able to put up 30 touchdowns in the playoffs. And he did win a Pro Bowl every single season of his career. So Tom Brady 2, I would say, is probably the shakiest of the 3 because he doesn't have the 3 Super Bowl wins. But I still think that Tom Brady number 2 had a more impressive career, as impressive as Steve Young, and more impressive than the next comparison, which is Kurt Warner. Now, Brady number 2, but I put Brady number 3 in comparison to Kurt Warner because of the storyline. So after Brady number 2 retires from his short career, Brady number 3 comes into the scene. And Brady number 3 was bagging groceries for a while. Brady number 3 was watching the Patriots. He was good friends with the other Bradys when he was growing up. He's been following their careers, and he wanted to get into football. Now, he's a little late to the game, just a little bit. He's 38 years old. So he's not a young chipper right now, but he wanted to get into the game. He's been playing football his whole life. He feels like he can do a lot in the NFL. So 38-year-old Tom Brady number 3 comes onto the scene. 2016, he goes 11-1. He was suspended before he even started playing football. I think that people thought that he was cheating by having the same name as the 2 previous quarterbacks of the Patriots, and so because he had the same name as them, they gave him 4 games for his first season. So he came onto the league immediately setting records with a 14-1 touchdown to interception ratio, with 28 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions. He had 4 Pro Bowls in his career, in his 6-season career, very short career, because he started at a very late age. He had 71 wins and 22 losses, with 26,000 yards, 196 touchdowns, and 53 interceptions. He is the only Tom Brady to have a passer rating over 100. In his playoff career, he was 13-3, almost as good as Brady number 1. He had over 5,000 yards, which is something that very few quarterbacks have ever done before. And he had 30 touchdowns, as well as 11 interceptions, and a quarterback rating of 94.7. So Brady number 3, 5,000 career playoff yards, more than anyone else here, Hall of Famer or Tom Brady. And a 3-1 touchdown to interception ratio in the playoffs is very impressive. So we're comparing Tom Brady number 3 to Kurt Warner now, and they played a similar number of games. If he had been one of the other Tom Bradys, he would have had the same number of starts. But he did finish with 4 more wins than Kurt Warner, actually. He played 24 less games, but he did finish with 4 extra wins. 71-22 versus Kurt Warner's 67-49. Brady number 3 did have less yards than Kurt Warner, but he beat him by over 20 yards per game. He had almost as many touchdowns and far less interceptions, less than half of the interceptions. And the comparison for these two mostly is, again, Pro Bowls and MVPs. I matched up Tom Brady. The other Tom Brady was Steve Young because he had 7 Pro Bowls, as did Steve Young, and I matched up these 2 Tom Bradys because of their Pro Bowls and their playoff success. This Tom Brady had more playoff success than the previous Tom Brady, so I thought he would be a better comparison for Kurt Warner. This Tom Brady went 13-3 in the playoffs with an 81.3 winning percentage and 3 Super Bowl rings. Kurt Warner, 13 playoff starts, 9-4 in those games, 62% winning percentage and 1 ring. Tom Brady, number 3, had over 5,000 career playoff yards compared to Kurt Warner's 4,000, and he had more yards per game as well. He played more games than Kurt Warner did, but he didn't quite have as many touchdowns, with only 30 compared to Kurt Warner's 31. But his passer rating was higher than any other Tom Brady at 94.7. Kurt Warner still beating him at 102.8. Kurt Warner had a very impressive playoff career, but Tom Brady's 3 Super Bowl rings likely puts him above Kurt Warner as far as legacy goes. I think that the major comparison here is the fact that both of these quarterbacks had very strong statistics and very short careers for their time period. Tom Brady, number 3, obviously played later on than Kurt Warner did. Tom Brady, number 3, started playing about 5 to 10 years after Kurt Warner finished playing football, but Kurt Warner had gotten to the tail end of the changeover for the new wave of passing offense. Tom Brady, number 3, had a phenomenal career, although he only played 93 games. The argument is still similar to Tom Brady, number 1, where if you're able to win 3 Super Bowl rings, much like Troy Aikman, much like Brady, number 1, no matter how many seasons you play, you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. All three of these Tom Brady, also this Brady and Brady 1, are tied at number 4 of all time for the most playoff wins, behind Joe Montana and the guys with 14. So yeah, those are Tom Brady's 3 Hall of Fame careers. After making this video, I figured that I would add in this part to it as well. I combined Tom Brady 1, 2, and 3 together and compared them to Kurt Troyong. All three of these guys played at the same time, but I figured I would make Kurt Troyong the quarterback as a combination of the three of them had they played in 3 separate careers. Over the career, Tom Brady played 316 games. These guys all played 424 combined. Although he played 108 less games, Tom Brady only had 12 less wins and less than half of the losses, with a 77% winning percentage compared to Kurt Troyong's 60% winning percentage. Tom Brady had 84,000 yards compared to Kurt Troyong's 98,000, so 15,000 less yards, but he did have more yards per game than Kurt Troyong did. Tom Brady had 624 touchdowns, which is actually more than Kurt Troyong had in his career. With 108 less games, he still had more touchdowns. And obviously he has less interceptions because of the less games, but he has less than half of the interceptions. He also has 15 Pro Bowl appearances and 3 MVPs compared to Kurt Troyong's 17 Pro Bowls and 4 MVPs. In the playoffs, though, Tom Brady played more playoff starts than all three of these quarterbacks combined, with 47 compared to 42 between Troy Aikman and Steve Young. 35-12 was his quarterback record. He had 7 extra wins over these guys and 2 less losses, with a 74.4 winning percentage compared to the 66.7 percentage of Kurt Troyong. He finished his career with 7 rings. And these 3 quarterbacks combined all had 5 Super Bowl victories. Again, Steve Young, I just went through all 3 of the names there. Steve Young had a couple of Super Bowl rings without being the starter, but they had 5 wins combined compared to Brady's 7. Brady also had 2,000 more yards in the playoffs and 20 more yards per game than these 3 combined. Slightly lower passer rating in the playoffs at 90.4 compared to 91.6, but a better touchdown to interception ratio with 86 touchdowns and 39 interceptions, more than doubling his interceptions with touchdowns compared to Kurt Troyong, who only had 73 touchdowns and 43 picks in their career. So that's my comparison between Tom Brady and 3 other NFL MVP Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Tom Brady definitely had 3 Hall of Fame careers. You can't really split someone's career into fourths. I think it would be hard to gerrymander a 4th career out of Tom Brady unless you literally just took the first 4 years of his career and called that a Hall of Fame career because there was 3 Super Bowls, and then taking the other 3 Super Bowls and calling that a Hall of Fame career, and then trying to gerrymander 2 out of the rest of the years. That might be an interesting idea for a video. I don't know if you guys would be interested in seeing me try and break down 4 careers out of Tom Brady's career. But anyways, I think that the fact that you're even able to make this comparison is insane. Whether or not all 3 of these guys would be able to get into the Hall of Fame based off of a third of Tom Brady's stats is a little bit questionable. But this wouldn't be a conversation with anyone else. Joe Montana didn't play long enough. Peyton Manning doesn't have enough rings for it to be a conversation. Although he does have the MVPs to do it, I think you need more than 2 rings in order to make 3 MVP careers out of your career. So this was a proper tribute to Tom Brady's career. I wasn't really doing one yesterday. Yesterday was more of just a thank you, but this is a proper tribute to Tom Brady. So, and his 3 Hall of Fame careers. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hope you guys like this idea for a video, and I'll hopefully try and get some more videos out this week. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.